Okay. Okay.
Hello, everybody. It is Jane Rachel, and I'm here today with two amazing moms who searched near and far to get their children treatment for maladaptive daydreaming, and they both ended up connected with me, which I'm really grateful for. Jamie, why don't you go first and tell us a little bit about, what about Jack's behavior and the daydreaming started to worry you?
Okay. Well, when Jack was about 2, we noticed some odd behavior. He would sort of pace almost very quickly, though. It was almost a run back and forth in our house, other places too. But at the time, seemed to be mainly at home when he wasn't engaged in something like television or, playing or something like that. And he would, make some strange kind of body movements. And at the time, I was a social worker. I've been a social worker for like 20 years. So, and I've worked with children. So at the time I was noticing some other sensory related issues. And I wasn't sure if what we were seeing was spectrum related. So, cause it almost looked like stimming. As he got older, he described it. I think around 3, he was able to verbalize what was going on, and he would call it thinking. He was thinking. So, and he would tell us what he was thinking about. At the time, he was really into trains. So it was usually about trains. Sometimes it would veer off into other things, but it was intense at times. We would be able to pull him out of it. He wasn't like I could engage him if I said, Jack, lunch is ready. He could stop. He didn't always want to. He would be very immersed in the daydreaming and his thinking. And, I sometimes would have to say, it's time to stop thinking and come to eat. So, there was definitely some concerns as to what this was. We had, at that point, he was starting preschool, and they were also seeing a lot of sensory related stuff at school. So we have had him evaluated at the time, and he was so young, and there were a lot of sensory issues going on, as well as attentional issues. And they thought that he might be on the spectrum. In fact, they called me and told me I should be ready for that diagnosis. I knew that was not what I was seeing at that point. He was very well related. He was very affectionate. There was no other symptoms of spectrum, or no other spectrum behaviors that I felt would warrant that diagnosis. So I took the matter in my own hands and took him to a well-known developmental pediatrician in our area, who within like 5 minutes said, he's not on the spectrum. That's not what you're seeing. There are sensory issues and there's some ADHD-like symptoms, but he's not on the spectrum. So, we were obviously relieved to not have a spectrum diagnosis, but there was still always a question as to what were we really seeing? What was this? No one seemed to know. We went to a neurologist. They I wouldn't say they brushed it off. They listened to my concerns, but it wasn't like they weren't overly concerned. Like, oh, he's thinking, no big deal, But for years and years and years, we watched the thinking kind of, I wouldn't say it progress, but as they get bigger, the movement gets bigger, and we were, still kind of wondering why. What are we seeing here? Like, what is this? And then I found an article about not maladaptive daydreaming, but non-autistic stereotypical movement. And that led to a lot of Google searches and finding some neurologist in British Columbia, whose name I can't remember. And I think it was Freeman, maybe was his name, who was studying, right? He's studying it. And I started to sort of tie it together. So this seems like what we're seeing. This seems like what Jack is doing. And, the paper he wrote on it was great. I mean, it basically said, this is what you're seeing. It's not something that necessarily needs to be treated. It's just something that is. And, it can, kids, some people as they age are able to control it better than others. And it seemed like at the time Jack Jack was, we weren't seeing it really at school. We were seeing it mainly at home. So we kind of left it alone. And then as he got older, I think he was around 10 when I found you. And I had gone back to do some more research because he was himself feeling a little alone in this. He was aware now that other people didn't do this.
Yep.
He felt like he was the only one. And, and I started to feel for him really, that he was experiencing this and we didn't really know why. So, I don't even remember how I found your article, Jane, but I was just Googling, doing like this, it was like the middle of the night. I was Google searching stuff and suddenly that Atlantic article popped up and I read it and I thought, this is it. This is what it is. And I showed Jack, I read it to him right away, like the next day, and he felt so much better. I really did.
Oh my gosh.
He's like, oh, that's it. He's like, that's what it is. And I was like, I read it to him and it was really nice. And then I found you. I don't remember how. I Googled your name and finally was able to contact you. And that really was it from there. And, it's been really nice for him to know that there's so many other people experiencing this.
So many.
And it's not like a life sentence of any sort. Like, it comes and goes and the intensity differs and that a lot of the people, I've read a lot of people's stories are very successful and very creative. And that really is, it really fits with who he is. It just seems to be part of who he is. So that is it in a nutshell. That,
And that's, we were just before we got on, I was talking to my niece and I was telling Sarah, she tells me she spends her entire day in her imagination and she doesn't think it's a problem because, she's an engineer, she's got friends, she's got, right. So it's not, it doesn't, it is like, I don't want to negate people's feelings who are worried about it, because if you are worried about it, it's a big deal, but it doesn't have to be a big deal. And it's not a big deal to everybody. It's a spectrum. So, I'll just say, and then I want Sarah to tell the story about Ellie, but it's just, it's such a different day because, my parents were very loving, wonderful parents, but they saw all the exact same stuff that you did. And they're just like, it got to the point where my mom was like busy. I called it my game. I'm playing my game. So like, if I was bored, my mom would be like, go find a string. Cause I would shake the shoelace, go play your game. Like they were not the slightest bit worried about it, which honestly, if they had been back then, they wouldn't have gotten any answers anyway. But it it amazes me that, you just went, you did so much research. Sarah, does any of this ring true for you? And I know your daughter's older, but
yeah. Some of it rings true. I'm super impressed, Jamie, that you were so on top of it at such a young age, because I have to say there were, my daughter Ellie is she's 18 now, and we really discovered this, I think, when she was 15 or 16. But I think there were signs earlier. I just didn't know what to look for. And for the longest time, Ellie had no idea that her experience was different than many people's, right? I think you know what you know of your own reality. And I remember one day she asked me what I do when I'm bored. And I said, well, I think about all the things I have to do, I guess. I think of, the errands that I've got to run, or just, fun things that are coming up or whatever. But, that's what I do. And she just made this awful face and she's like, oh, that's horrible, because she was just sort of starting to realize, I think, she'd been online and, in different, I don't know if it was Reddit or some other forum or board, but she'd seen reference to maladaptive daydreaming. And I think it was a wake-up call for her, because she realized, like, wow, this is not everyone's experience. And so she started asking other people what they do, and realized that, although there are a lot of people who do it, there are a lot of people who don't. And so she was trying to explore more, and she was actually the one who gave me the Atlantic article and a couple of other resources. Because she was starting, it really rang true to her, and she wanted to learn more. And it really honestly explained so much about Ellie and just all these behaviors that we'd, seen at an earlier age but didn't understand, I guess. And she, like we've been talking about, does have a variety of different diagnoses. From early age, we've known she had ADD, and there was, along the way, there was thought that maybe she had a mood disorder. There was all sorts of different exploration of what her diagnoses were and are. And I think we're pretty certain she's on the spectrum. I think what used to be considered high functioning, she's in college, she's doing okay. But she definitely has some behaviors that are, she's not the most social kid, I would say. And I think, once we found out about the dreaming, so much clicked into place, because I think she once told me a long time ago, it's not that I don't have social skills, Mom, I just don't always use them, because what's going on in her head is so much more interesting to her than most of the people that she meets. It hurts me a bit because I'm a pretty social person, and I have always worried that she doesn't have enough, peer interaction or whatever. But as she's grown and I've grown and we've understood more, she's not unhappy. She's very happy with her internal life, and I think over time has learned better how to kind of keep it in balance so that she can still function in the real world when she's got something pressing that she needs to. It's just something she does when she wants to escape for a while.
And, I feel like sometimes I say the same thing over and over again, but I do hear from people all around the world. And I don't like when they say, I've done this my whole life, I never thought it was a problem, and now I think I have a psychiatric disorder, because I think a lot of people daydream this way, and it's only a problem if it, impairs your life function. And honestly, with me, outwardly, there was necessarily no, I had friends, I had boyfriends, I was doing well, like there was no outward effect, but internally I just felt exhausted and never, like I never felt fully present in the moment. And it was exhausting keeping up when I just wanted this out of my head, or I wanted the compulsion to stop. But my niece doesn't want it to stop, but she's an artist and an inventor, and she thinks it helps her. So it is a spectrum. And Sarah, I think also just wanted to point out too, that I do hear from people from all over the world, and a lot of times there are dual diagnoses, right? There's like, some people have social anxiety, some people are on the spectrum, some people have OCD, but it can also, I believe, exist on its own too. And what I found is, since no one really specializes in maladaptive daydreaming because it's not a known disorder, I usually advise people to get the treatment in. So if those, like for me, getting the OCD under control is what helps get the maladaptive daydreaming under control. So it's like, if there are known other conditions, working on those. But I'm curious if either of you, like Jamie, you went to all these like really big heavy hitter doctors. Like, did anyone had they seen the daydreaming before? Did they, what did they call it, or what did they think about it?
I honestly called it they didn't have a name for it at all. It's like they didn't even really understand what I was describing to them. I didn't get much feedback. I felt very on my own, in my understanding of this. And it was really just through talking to Jack that I was understanding what it was, because he got better and better every year at describing it. And I remember one time he described it, he said, "Mom, it feels like I'm wearing a pair of virtual reality goggles." And I said, okay, I kind of get it now. That was a really good description for me to understand what he was experiencing, how immersed he actually was. But no, even now, I send the articles to, the people that we work with, that he works with. I don't know. It's because it's not in the DSM. It's kind
So-
of like, all right, well, okay.
Well, and that's why I'm talking about this so many years later, is because
Yeah.
it needs to be recognized. Like I think,
Yes.
Roger Freeman, who you spoke to, told me
Yes,
about this
Roger
program
Freeman. Yeah. Mhm.
at Johns Hopkins where they're working on reducing the movement, but they're not at all like getting what's going on in the head,
Right,
which I don't
right.
see the point of that, because when
No,
I
I
stop
don't
the
either.
movement, so like, yeah, I don't know. Sarah, did you find that any doctors had any clue about any of this?
No, and I had to do the same thing that Jamie did. I would supply the articles to the doctors that we spoke to and that we worked with. And, fortunately, I also, in the early days when I was still figuring this out and finding you, Jane, I did connect with Dr. Sommer.
Yep.
Mhm.
Somer.
And he was fantastic and,
She's amazing.
very super responsive to me. And even though, Ellie at the time, was still a teenager. So his scale that he's developed to determine whether you're kind of a maladaptive daydreamer is designed for adults, but he did share it with me and, said, it really needs to be analyzed by a professional. But so Ellie, answered the questions, and then he took a look at it and said, yeah, it looks like she probably is, but I couldn't diagnose this without also having a licensed therapist look at it. We were engaged in so many efforts to understand everything she was going through, because she does have a lot of diagnoses, and we were about to have a full neuropsych evaluation anyway, because it was time to renew that for her IEP. And I brought this to the woman that was going to do it, and she fortunately was very open to learning more. She spoke to Dr. Sommer.
That's great.
And, but not everybody does. I remember another time we were at a very well-known clinic in the city, and they were polite about it, but they definitely didn't have a whole lot of interest in learning more about it.
Yeah, it's this weird, and I mean that's kind of my other soapbox. It's this weird circle of like they don't want to look at anything that's not scientifically validated. But how do you find? I mean, when I went back to grad school for psychology, that's where I figured out why I couldn't get help. I also have some physical conditions for either my mental health or my physical conditions for all these years. Because if there's like, I tried to show people these websites and they're like, nope, those are garbage, they're not science, they're self-selected sample. But how do you find something new if you're not willing, I mean, yes, I get that it's not science, but if thousands of people have the same symptoms, it means something, right?
Right,
It's
right.
so sorry. That was I digress. It just gets me so upset. What advice do you have for other parents out there? Either one of you going through something similar?
Listen to your child, and find professionals who will listen to your child and listen to you. I mean, there's, I think if you're coming up and against, unwillingness to listen, I think it's time to look for another doctor, whether it's your psychiatrist or therapist or whoever. And I think also, I think having faith that maturity helps to be able to, I don't know if control it is the right word, but just I think as at least in my daughter's case, as she has grown up and sort of understood this about herself, she's developed the ability to do it when she wants to, but not fall down a rabbit hole of doing it all the time.
Right. Yes.
Very good advice. Jamie?
So I agree with Sarah. I think, listening to the child and, what they're experiencing is so important, and not being afraid to look at, what it is. I know that a lot of parents are, when their child's having difficulty, they it can be scary. Is my, what's wrong with my child, and why are they different? And sometimes, that tends to, it can go one of two ways from what I've seen, just being in the field of mental health. It can go to total avoidance of the issue, or it can go to almost like too much, like you were saying, like, oh my God, they have a psychiatric condition, there's something wrong with them, they need to be medicated, and not saying, I haven't swung from one end of the spectrum to another at times. I think we all do and can, depending on, like Sarah was saying, the age. There were times during Jack's development where I was more concerned than I am now. But it's sort of important that you just keep talking to them and listening to what their experience is within all of this. For Jack, it was really important that I find him a community, of others that were experiencing that. And I think that is one of the greatest things we can do for our children, is to find others that are experiencing, so they don't feel like they're alone. We might not have been able to find anybody in our own personal community here, but just knowing that there's others out there has been such an enormous help for his self-confidence, and for just him feeling his wellness, his overall sense of wellness. And then, I always try to look at what he is experiencing in all realms of his life, as, how do we turn that, how do we use that for him, for his own personal development? Like, because I do believe that there are gifts within this, and we can use those to empower him. He's super creative and I mean, beyond me, and I think part of that is because of the way his brain works. And so I want him to keep, I don't want him to feel any shame around these things. I want him to feel like, this is me, this is who I am, and I'm going to use this, instead of letting it, bring me down. So I think that's also one of my main, always my main advice for parents, is look for the gifts within it.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but or even a parent, but I've talked to parents from around the world. And I think the mistakes fall on I mean, I shouldn't say mistakes, because it's all well-meaning, but it's like, it's what exactly you both said, listening and validating. So like the one extreme of like, what my parents did is everybody daydreams, it's not a big deal, was very invalidating. But on the other hand, I've seen parents do things like, stop pacing, like nagging the kid all the time.
Right.
And I mean, I did get on the phone, I mean, I email anybody who gets back to me, but if a child is involved, I'll talk to the parent.
Yeah.
And one parent was telling me, like, they keep yelling at the kid to stop. I'm like, that is not helping. Right.
Not
like that does not help at all.
Right.
So I think, I mean, it's really hard because there aren't like real answers out there. But I think just thinking, I almost started to, Jamie, when you were talking, it was just flashback to when I was a kid, like just knowing that there are others out there. Like I didn't I spent years like searching databases, and it was funny because I would be like, that was the one thing that got my full attention other than daydreaming, was like searching databases and
right.
Asking doctors, and everybody said there's no such thing. So there's, the communities on the internet are double-edged swords, because sometimes there's misinformation out there. But I think more important than that is that the sense of community. And I think it's what you both said, letting the child lead. If they don't feel like it's, a problem, then let it be. But really listening, because at this point there's not a diagnosis or a treatment. And then the other thing I suggest, which I know that I know from Facebook that you do with Jack, is that when kids have hobbies that they're passionate about, like you can't be daydreaming when you're really fully engaged in life. So I know he has musical theater. So like any sort of activity, hobby, like whatever it is, trying to find some passion in life, I think is really helpful.
Say I can't daydream, Mom, when I'm at theater. There's too much going on. I have to, if he is excited about something and he finds joy in it and purpose and meaning, then he doesn't need to daydream. It's when he's it's when he's bored. It's when, you know, he's lack of stimulation. So yeah, it's just
Exactly.
the way it is.
Exactly. I mean, I just see that your kids are so lucky to have both of you. Just, you know, for the research you did and the outreach you did and the listening and the validating, you know, they're so lucky to have that. So, just any last thoughts on anything I forgot to ask before I sign off?
I was going to say one more thing, which is, I think it's important, in addition to the listening, I think it's actually assuming your child is okay with speaking about it and sharing it. I think it was a very important thing for our extended family and close friends to have Ellie explain sort of a little bit about what's going on in her head and why sometimes she needs her space. You know, she needs a lot of alone time too. And I think that was very helpful to our family. And I also, you know, there's a genetic component to all this. This is a hereditary condition, and you know, but people don't talk about it. So it was actually helpful once she started to talk about it a little bit. It came out that there are people, you know, in our family who do it too. And I found that helpful to know, because you know, it as a mom, you are concerned in the beginning, and sometimes I would go on these online forums and I would find it frightening, because sometimes people post about just that this has become an obsession, it's taken over their lives. And you know, meeting you, Jane, or hearing that others in our extended family have it, well, I see that they're functional, right?
Yeah.
And that they're leading lives that are fulfilling, and that's what we want as parents.
Yeah. And I've heard from like so many creative, intelligent people around the world who are functioning just fine. Doesn't mean that there aren't times when they really, you know, feel like it's getting in their way and they need to work on it. But I do believe it's a spectrum. And Dr. Freeman told me a lot of the children that he worked with completely outgrow it. And then other people, on the other hand, it does turn maladaptive, but it's up to the person, you know, to decide when this has become too much for them. But yeah, I think just, you know, for other moms out there watching, there is, like I said, a lot of people going through this, and a lot of people, it really does not affect their lives. That said, you know, don't invalidate your child's feelings and take it seriously, because that's the only tip I would add to what you said, Sarah, is just make sure that they have some literature handy if you're telling extended friends and family, because sometimes friends and family don't respond that well, right? They fall into the, you know, oh, it's nothing, or oh my God, you're crazy, and neither of those extremes are helpful. So it's you want to make sure that you're telling people who are going to be sensitive and have the literature ready to show them.
Absolutely, yes. That the Atlantic article was shared widely in our family.
Yes, it was very widely.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for sharing. And I've gotten the privilege to actually meet both of your kids. Sarah, Ellie was in person. Jack, it was just, I think, on the phone or something.
Yeah,
but you really, but they're just both like incredible human beings who I am looking forward to watching their successes in lives. So thank you both so much.